Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be meeting Dominey Drew this morning as part of the Born to Rise project. And I feel honored. I'm just really getting to know Dominey and the work that she's doing, but we had a wonderful conversation before scheduling this interview. And I just felt like she is a wealth of, I don't even know what to say, information, connection, everything. I resonated with so much of her beingness and her spirituality and all the things that she's studied and processed in her own life. And I'm excited to talk with her today. So welcome, Dominey. How are you today?
I am doing so well. I'm so excited to be here. I feel very, very honored, and I'm really excited to share. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about, before we really dive into the questions and everything, but I'd love to just know and have our audience know a little bit about you and the work that you're doing. And I don't know if you want to prefer to weave that into the questions or just give you a minute to kind of share what you'd like to share about that.
Absolutely. It'll probably end up being a little bit of both because a lot of my life is my purpose, which is my work. Work's not even quite the right word because, left to my own devices, which I pretty much am. That's what I choose to do with my time because it's really what I feel I incarnated to impart to the world. So I'm 38 years old. I have studied intensive personal development work for about 20 years, almost 20 years. And through that time, I have transformed, like the epitome of the word transformed, in ways I didn't even know people could transform. I really went from a state of being suicidal in my teenage years. I was really struggling psychologically. I was a mess of just insecurities, self-hatred, very, very low self-worth, low self-esteem, low self-confidence. I had, voices in my head, critical voices, all these sorts of things. And I really felt like I didn't belong. An experience I know that a lot of people have as teenagers. I felt like I didn't belong here on the planet. And so for me, the suicidal piece actually ended up being this real desire to go home. I even remember saying that as a teenager. I remember saying I want to go home, and even as they said it, I was like, that doesn't make any sense as I say it, but it was my truth. There was something that was true about that. And so it was really a difficult time. It was difficult even to be me. That's how it felt. And when I found the work that I now teach, I remember the first weekend I transformed more than I ever thought possible. And so I dove straight into it and I studied that. I went to intensive 4-year school with that, and then intensive 4-year energy healing school that was incredibly transformative as well. I got a master's degree, and I really just dove into this work. And I knew from that first weekend, this is what I wanted to teach. And so I then eventually formed that into a business. And I now, for several years, I worked with men and dating single men, helping single men attract life partners. And then it gradually shifted to where I work with sort of high net worth individuals or, CEOs, leaders, essentially, who are doing great things in the world, but struggling in their personal lives, right? So they're successful in their professionally, but in their personal lives, they're really struggling because they're holding themselves back from what they want, right? There's subconscious self-sabotage. And that really is my area of focus. It's that area of subconscious self-sabotage, the way we create the things in our life that we don't want, and bring that to awareness so that we can actually be empowered enough to fix it.
Oh my gosh, they seem kind of related. I mean, not to put the fact that you have to have a partner to bring you happiness, but oftentimes that personal side affects both. So I love that piece for sure. So Born to Rise. I mean, I know you kind of love that title and what that maybe means, but what does it mean for you to think of the idea of rising? Obviously helping people transform and I would say potentially rise. What does that mean for you? What does that really mean to transform or rise?
I do love that title. It's funny. Even just as you said it right there, I was like, boy, that feels like it wraps up even more. Obviously, I knew the title before coming on this interview, but right as you said that, it landed in even a new way of that's why I came. I incarnated to help people to rise. And the significance here, I'm feeling chills as I say this, significance is here is that in order for me to fulfill my purpose of facilitating the inner evolution, which leads to the rising, I had to rise.
Absolutely.
I had to. And
Yeah.
I that was incredibly different. I mean, I feel like it was brick by brick. It was just, sometimes a layer of paint at a time is what it felt like. That level of slow and enduring. It was not easy. It was struggle. It was going into my deepest wounds. It was, all of this sort of work. And now I have achieved this level of effortlessness in my life that was not even a consideration before. It was, yes, it was not my reality, but it wasn't even a reality I thought was an option. Everything used to be such a struggle. I used to really make things a lot harder than they needed to be. Obviously, again, totally unconsciously. But I had to go through all of those issues. And now when I sit with someone and I'm in my purpose, I'm like, this is what I'm here for. I just sit with someone. There's a way in which you even said when in your intro, you said you resonated with my beingness. And
Yeah.
that's actually something that is fairly common around me now, because there's a way in which simply having gone through all of this and really gone through completely a lot of it, I can sit in a way that allows the other to feel safe, to feel heard, to feel seen, because they are, simply because when I sit and I'm looking at someone, I'm looking at them, I'm not looking through the screen of who I think I am or who I think they are or how I think the world is. And
That
mostly that's what we do.
that feels like such a key point to me. This idea that we're not through our stuff at them, because that's real clarity and presence person. And I do, when we rise, you can't help but want to share that because there is such a freedom there. And for me, it's inspiring to think that, wow, if more people felt this way, wouldn't we all be a lot happier and affecting people and each other in such a positive way? So yeah, why? I mean, like you said, we make it our work, but it almost doesn't feel that way. It just feels like, come on, everybody, join this because it's super great.
Yes, exactly. And it's interesting, just as you're saying, what you're saying actually has a lot of truth. It's you end up, quote, sharing it. You share it simply because you're radiating your being,
Yeah.
right? I'm sharing in a much more sort of human way because this is my purpose. I'm creating a global movement wherein the entire purpose of my being has that element of, I want to share this. I want people to know that what they're going through is optional.
Well, and my next question was like, how has rising or transforming yourself shaped your own mission? And you're kind of saying that, but maybe you want to expand on that a little bit more. Like, I mean, we get these feelings, if you will, with beingness, and then, but what motivates us to really share that once we have transformed for you?
Right. Yeah. And not everyone does. But
Right.
there's an element of sharing anyway, simply by, okay, having achieved a certain level. It's like being in the same room with a guru. I mean, a guru means teacher, which means they're sort of in some element of sharing anyway. But being in the room, say with an enlightened person, just by being there, whether they're consciously sharing it or not, they're automatically sharing simply by the beingness. This is what you're picking that up. So for me, I want to share it intentionally. That's my goal. That's my purpose. So I think that comes from an underlying desire, and that's just each person's purpose and intentionality in this lifetime. How do they want to show up? On what level? To how many people? To me, my mother, as I said, I used to make things a struggle that weren't, and my mother would try to help me fix it. And she'd say, why don't you just have a nice little practice? Like, instead of like trying to grow your business to this like incredible level, why don't you just like have a nice little practice where you just charge a little money and everybody comes in? And I was just like, there's no part of me that does not say no to that. Like, I absolutely not. Like to me, that is just not the life I want. So I'm happy to take those steps and to move through the higher levels that need to be moved through in order to reach on a global level, because to me, that is the point. That is my point.
Specifically with the work you mentioned, working with men and their personal lives, what was the kind of inspiration there after you did your own transforming? What led you in that particular direction, right?
There were a couple of things that led me there. One is I've got rather a masculine style. I've always been very sort of comfortable in my masculinity. I had to learn to balance out the feminine, which I now sit in pretty evenly. But before, I was less comfortable with the vulnerability that's required there. And I feel very comfortable with men. Men feel very comfortable with me. There's something where they tend to just open up. It tends to be, I've traveled a lot all around the world, and for the most part, I did that by myself. And I would go to, I don't know, I'm in Germany. I don't speak any German. I go into a bar and I'd sort of sit there and have a drink, and undoubtedly somebody next to me would start talking, and like within 10 minutes, they're telling me things like, about their, very intensive personal life. And they'd be like, God, I can't believe I'm telling you this. That was, that I kept hearing this over and over again. So I was like, so there's something about that community that really, resonates with me. And as far as the dating aspect, I really had to go into what sounds like fun to me, right? What is it? What if I could spend my day talking about anything, what would it be? And I thought, oh, sex and attraction sounds fun. Let's get into the juiciness of it. Let's go there. That sounds great.
All of that.
And there's the other element is that there's not a lot of support out there for men.
That's great. Well, and I think too, like there's some maybe innately in us, like more of that masculine side that you were blessed with, right? As the person who's can now help men in a more beneficial way, if you will. And I love that you've taken that side of yourself, seen it as a gift, if you will, and applied it in a way that's helpful. And I think that's something I really encourage when I'm working with my own clients or talking with people, even about their internal narratives and their stories and how they look at themselves, is that I think it's important to see that when we are in an expansive place, it is about saying, these are my gifts that I have. This is what I am blessed with, whether society calls it good or I call it good or my family called it good or bad. It's what I have and who I am and how I can use it best in the world. So I love hearing you say that you've trusted this gift you with this more masculine energy and a feminine body or whatever we design that to look like, you're using it in a positive way. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I know in the beginning that, I'd love to hear what you feel about this idea of your story, because you mentioned this vulnerability on the feminine side. What does it mean to you to share your story, and is that something that feels important as you move forward in this project or being a part of a project that's about sharing our stories? You kind of have already.
Yeah.
What value do you feel that has or doesn't have in the world?
Well, I think that, traditionally story has been incredibly important. It's how history's been kept on, right? The origin stories. Native Americans sit around and share their origin stories over and over again and that's how history has moved. And I think there's massive significance in that. As far as relating to for me to relate to another person, I don't do that so much through the story. I relate with my clients through my story, or with just the world, not my potential clients, but to me, like, everybody's a potential client, simply because as I radiate, it's like whatever some resonates with some person, they will take learning from that, right? Again, that's the whole point of doing so much of my own work, is I can simply be, and in a way I can, I don't know, guide, help, support people simply by moving through my life. And to me, that's of just massive benefit. So it's a bit different. I tend to share my story in with the intention of another gaining whatever they need from it. And that is something that feels wonderful for me. I do that all the time. I do that on my podcast. I do that through my work. And a lot of people tend to resonate and take learning, and that's incredibly nourishing for me. I don't tend to take in information in quite that way. I don't take learning through other people's stories as much as other people seem like they do. For example, I will see someone, going to see someone talk about their story, and they'll say, oh, this woman spoke about her story and it was really rich and beautiful, and I can see as they're speaking the transmission that occurred, and I see the learning and the wisdom that was gained by the person who observed through that story. So there's a beautiful exchange that happens through stories. Sometimes it happens with me. I wouldn't say it's my main way of learning, but the value of it is irrefutable. I can see it operating in the world. It's huge.
And I'll just say that the fact that you shared that you were, suicidal at one point, but then when you faced that and went into what you called the darker side and expanded, that's inspiring to say for someone who may be in that place, right? So I can resonate with that too, is that, some stories I'll hear and it's like, that's not necessarily what I need to hear today. But then, if I had been in a similar experience to your own, then it might give me some, right? And then there's wanting to know more, like, well, how did you do that, right? And maybe that gives us an impetus to say, I'm going to explore that a little bit more, and there's hope for me. So yeah, I love that. And
even ask, as you said, maybe I need more of that. Like, even just to ask, that's the impetus to ask. Now maybe I'll just ask her how that happened.
Right.
Reality has shifted in that moment, and that's how evolution happens. That's how we grow.
Yes. And I think it's interesting to think about these historical stories that have kind of taken stories and come into one, like a cultural story, if you will, and then the individuals in that have their own stories. So it's a fascinating thing for me, because I think part of the development and the way that history has been carried on can get convoluted and clump, and sort of we look at these things as a group, almost energy, where there's also these individuals within it. So it's important to break down the cultural story sometimes and look at, where did that all come from? How did that start? So fascinating work. Look, I'm excited that you're a part of this. And if you have any other final things you'd like to say before we leave, I know you have a podcast. What's the podcast?
It's called The Art of Attraction with Dominey Drew.
Yep, I love that. So everybody, please follow that. But more information on Dominey will be in her bio below, and you can certainly reach out to her and talk with her about her work. But it's been so fun getting to know you, and I can't wait for more. I definitely find you to be an attractive, energetic person, and love that you're working with men. Love that you're just doing the work that you're doing and following your truth. So good to talk to you.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. I really, any chance I get a chance to speak and to step into that purpose, it feels just so nourishing to me. And I absolutely love this project. I love what it's doing. I'm so excited to see where it's going to go. So thank you so much for spearheading and holding the vision for it.
You're welcome. And like all, born to rise.